Hello. All right, here we go. We're going to continue our video about culture and communication with Geert Hofstede. Hofstede is a German theorist, and when he was looking at the end of World War II and the change of and the impact of the our global world, he really is looking at rituals and patterns and communication from country to country, which has had such an important impact on the way that we understand culture. For anyone who has looked at Malcolm Gladwell's work, Malcolm Gladwell wrote a chapter in Outliers about plane crashes, where he uses Hofstede to examine the air traffic controllers of famous plane crashes to try and understand that there were actually communication failures. So the impact of Hofstede is huge, and it's not just Gladwell who looks at it. There's a lot of people who are using it to try and figure out ways to really dig in on intercultural communication and figure out ways to be adapting and being appropriate to be more effective. So today, my goal is, I can't go over all of Hofstede's theories, but I definitely want to look at individualism and collectivism, power distance, and uncertainty avoidance. Those are my main goals right now with you. So when we talk about, we're going to start with individualism, collectivism. Here we go, one of my favorites. Let's start with individualism. In individualism, the prime directive is to take care of yourself. That is the most important thing, to be self-sufficient, to be able to take care of yourself, whatever that looks like. Everything from knowing how to take care of your room, tying your own shoes, fastening your seatbelt, walking to school for the first time. Like, you can really feel an individual culture. The childhood experience is really these milestones of what you could do by yourself. And even like driving for the first time and things like that become part of the way that your life is measured. What could you do on your own? And then there's this drive through childhood in an individual kind of culture to, what do you want to be when you grow up? Because there's the belief system is that if you have purpose, if you enjoy what you're doing, or you're using your talent the way you're supposed to and become excellent with your talent, then you'll be able to take care of yourself. You'll be able to be self-sufficient. You'll be able to live a happier life because you can take care of yourself. Now, this doesn't mean that you're not taking care of other people. Let's be really clear. There are really, really intense family values here where you're taking care of yourself so you can take care of others. So it's this I connected to the we, whatever that we unit is. And you'll hear parents not just ask this incessant question of, what do you want to be when you grow up? What do you want to be when you grow up? We sent you this camp. Did you like that? You took that special class. Did you like that? Right. But there's also this like intensity of sacrifice for that the parents or the immediate extended family, it doesn't usually have too much extension, but the very close-knit part of the family and individual will sacrifice them to make sure you can do what you want to do. Whether that is if you are really talented in dance or music or athletics or sports, you will see great sacrifices by the family to get you what you need to do what you have to do so you can take care of yourself. In fact, at the end of college, we see this kind of in the newer part of this culture, is that when college is over, we'll see some people return home to live at home to figure out what the kind of job they want, to figure out where they want to live. And even if they get a job that maybe isn't their final destination, it's always to save money so then one day they can be on their own. That's totally different than what is happening in collective cultures. So in collective cultures, the drive is the we. In fact, there is this, the self is the we. So when you take care of the we, you are also taking care of yourself. In this culture, kids that are growing up, they're not asked, what do you want to be when you grow up? They're usually told. And it's not necessarily by the parents. There we'll see much more hierarchies of elders or community that will make decisions about what the group needs. Do we need an engineer? Do we need a lawyer? Do we need a doctor? Do we need someone who's good at this? Or if the collective culture already has a family business, maybe it's a farm or a grocery store, whatever it is, there will be this kind of apprenticeship that children are raised in to take on those businesses or take on similar careers. And that, to me, even though Hofstede was looking at different countries, you're going to find these splits within families, right? Or within a country, within a region, or within your own family. It's also one of the experiences that I want to talk about, two different experiences. I want to talk about the experience, the immigrant experience in the United States, particularly, because that's where I live and my experience. But that you'll see sometimes a culture come in that is marginalized or has trouble incorporating into the business of the greater society. So they'll build, sometimes often because they're segregated into it, their own kind of neighborhood cultures. And they become very strong collective groups because of their marginalization and pushed out. And so if the kid grows up in this kind of oppressive environment, we'll see like a real intense creativity, or the way the culture will go and gravitate to the children to cultivate them as scientists, as engineers, in athletics, whatever talent that a child emerges on, the culture will identify it really quickly, and lots of sacrifices will be made, the same way as in individualism, to get that kid the resources. They'll even collect scholarships or do all sorts of things to send them out to the best university or to wherever they can go, but it's always for the return. You go so you can return. And usually when you return, you live in homes with multi-generations, or if you're not in the exact same home, you'll live very close to the generations of your family. And whatever you were sent out to do, you will come back to give back to the group. And it really just depends from culture group to culture group. But if someone returned back, let's say they go out and be a lawyer, our neighborhood needs a lawyer. We need someone who's going to represent us. Society is not taking care of us. So we need a lawyer to help us navigate this. And they're living in a family home, maybe with great grandparents or grandparents or aunts and uncles and nieces and nephews. The paycheck that they bring back goes to the family, and they'll be allowed an allowance out of it, but it's not usually their paycheck to keep. And that'll just depend from group to group. But we will find that as one of the things that can identify a more collective culture compared to the individual culture, where we have someone returning and now save your money, save your money, save your money, so you can build up wealth to go out one day and buy your own home or get yourself moved to where the opportunity is so you can take care of yourself. So I want to be clear that family values are on both sides of these. Just because if you've made sacrifices for your family, even a sibling, you could still be in an individual culture style, not a collective culture style. And one way to think about that is the way that you know yourself with the family. For example, in collective cultures, we'll see that even if they're talking about themselves, they'll often still use the word we. So we'll hear a lot more we in collectivism, where in individualism, there's more I kind of language style. One good place to find examples of this is with athletic teams like basketball or baseball, where there is sometimes people from a lot of different cultures, even different countries on the same team. So when they get in front of the reporters for an interview, they might, if they come from a more collective culture, you're going to hear the way that they talk very differently than someone from an individual culture. My favorite example is Ichiro, because I'm a big baseball fan. Often when Ichiro would talk, there was a big cultural difference in baseball in Japan versus baseball in America, including the name on the jersey. Things don't end in a tie. You play till you win. It's very individual driven. And when Ichiro would be interviewed, they'd say, "What do you think of your first place average, Ichiro?" And he'd say, "Oh yeah, we are having a great season. We are doing great as a team," right? So this we first kind of drive in the way that Ichiro would approach answering questions really revealed a cultural difference. And I'd love you to be able to tune your ear into that a little bit to hear how people are putting, where they're putting emphasis to help you be able to do better, to lower the salience and be more effective in conversations. Yeah. Oh, here's a great example. I love this example. So I was watching Say Yes to the Dress, and there was a woman from Thailand. Actually, she's firstborn American. Her family is from Thailand, and she brought her mother and her grandmother to the appointment for a wedding dress. And the young woman tells the lady at the store, "This is what we want in a dress. This is what we want in a dress." And she's explaining it. And she says, "We really got to make sure we get these things." So the woman grabs some dresses in the dressing room. She puts on a dress and she's like, "Oh, I love this dress. It's beautiful. Oh, I feel amazing in this dress." Goes out, shows mom, shows grandma. Grandma says, mom goes, "No." And then the woman says, "Oh no, this isn't our dress." And it goes on and like that. The grandma says no, mom says no, she says no, right? And then at one point, the sales lady is just getting so frustrated. "I don't know what is wrong with that girl. Why doesn't she speak up for herself? This day is about her and she should have the dress she loves. It is her day." Right? So this is that beautiful moment. If you're sitting on the couch with me watching this show, I go, "Oh, I know what this is." Individualism versus collectivism. So we have this kind of, the wedding is a great way to think about the difference between individualism and collectivism, that this bride's day and this drive towards the bride is very individual. Now, that does not mean that bride in individual culture does not want her family's approval for her dress. It doesn't mean that she doesn't want her family to be proud and happy and have a great wedding too. But those appointments on Say Yes to the Dress, where the family is more individual focused, it's going to drive towards, "Oh, she comes out. What do you all think of this dress?" And they go, "Well, what do you think of it?" Do you like this one? I'm not sure, right? There might be a little bit of this, a little of that, but they're going to do more of a conversation, and she's going to be in the dynamics of that to make her decision. Is this her dress? Eventually on that episode of Say Yes to the Dress, the grandma said, yes, I like that dress. The mom said yes. And she was crying and happy. Yes, this is the dress. I say yes to this dress, right? And both are driving towards happiness of the connection to their family. One is just moving from a hierarchical we to the individual, and the other one is centered on that I to connect to the family's happiness. I hope that makes a little bit of sense. All right, the next one question I just want to address right here. One question I often get in my classroom, since we're not in the classroom, I will answer it phantomly here, that you can exist on a spectrum. Please do not just say, and do not ever label anyone that you're either this or that. We want to see how we exist. And that goes for high context, low context with Edward T. Hall, and monochronic and polychronic. And when we see people existing on a spectrum, we want to say that they're able to code switch, or they have high competency of communication with intercultural communication, that they have an understanding of context and how to adapt to it and be appropriate to it. So that's all we're driving for you, is not to say, oh, well, I'm this or that, even if one is more dominant in your experience, but how to tune your ear and your observations to understand conversation in a totally different way. So you can then develop your competency to switch or code switch between these as needed. Okay, the next one I want to talk about is power distance. Power distance, okay, you ready? Here we go. Power distance is the degree of which people in a society or culture accept that some people have more power than others. That some people accept that some people have more, and with that, more power, more privilege than other people in that group or society. All right. So when we say low power or high power distance, this is the degree of which the people who have leadership and the people who don't have not just leadership, but power and privilege, how far apart are they, whether it's physical or other degrees of distance from the group. So one way to think about it is in the workplace, right? So if you have a CEO of a company, and then you have a CEO or a CFO, a board of directors, management, supervisors, and workers, right? There's in classical management style, which we study in organizational communication, there is a hierarchy to leadership. So a show like Undercover Boss is taking that high power distance structure of that management style and moving it towards trying to lower the power by pulling the CEO purposefully into situations where they have to move to the very bottom. And they usually put them on the lowest bottom of, right? They're cleaning the swimming pools, they're cleaning the airplanes, or whatever episode it is, to kind of get that experience, because the high power distance really removes people in power from the other experience. That's just one example. We could think about military and the high power distance structure of that. So in the more high power distance we have, the more the culture is that we don't question authority. We're not going to bother them with issues or complaints or whatever it is, because, and the belief structure of this culture is that the people in power are there to take care of the company, the society, whatever it is, so that they can keep us safe. They can keep us economically prosperous. They can make sure my job is not in jeopardy. And that's why we don't question them or bother them. And we want them to have distance from the menial work that we're doing so that they can do the job of taking care of everyone. And that is kind of the belief structure of a high power distance and why there's that distance. If you are in a more high power distance culture, you accept that. That's something that you accept. And you might actually, and here's a great example of where it exists on a spectrum, you might accept it more in one context, but not in another context. But it just depends. If you have a family that's been in the military a lot, you might have had a lot of generations in the military or a lot of members in the military. You might see that high power distance structure of the military be used as a way to structure the family. And in a family, you'll hear things like, because I said so, right? Why do you have to be home by 9 p.m. curfew? Because I said so. Why do you have to do this? Right? Don't question me. This is the way it is. I said so. And that's kind of how it'll translate in parenting. In a low power distance structure, whoever is in the man leader role of that group, you can still have leadership. We can still have followership. We can still have someone makes a decision and everybody agrees to it. But there's a different kind of path to it. We have access to that person. That person who has the power, we can question them. In fact, we expect to question them, and we expect them to be accessible to questions. Even press conference, the press is one way that we ask questions of leaders or create accountability for leadership is the system of press. And that's to lower the power distance that you do have to be answerable to the public. Also, we'll often see in low power distance that the person who is in that position is in a rotating position as opposed to a monarchy or a dictatorship where that person is there and they're there till they die and they're kind of ordained into that position. Whereas in low power, we see it as a rotating position for a term or, you know, a several, whatever it is. So if you've ever been part of a club or a board or a PTA group, maybe there was a president and a vice president and a secretary and a treasury, but they had like a 3-year, or sometimes it's only a year. And then other people in the group can move into those positions. If you are low power distance and you are stuck in a high power system, you will probably develop a lot of conflict by trying to rebel against that distance. And that'll look like questioning authority, or if you are not allowed to question authority, if you are totally muted and have no voice, you might self-segregate yourself and find allies who agree with you. And this is often why workplaces will end up with small groups that where people can find allies and commiserate, the water cooler commiseration about the oppressive structures they're having to work or live under. And unions form as a way to try and squash power distances or create accountability for being able to, you know, I lost the thought. Okay. If you're a high power distance and you're stuck in a low power distance, it can be just as torturous because you're like, why is everybody wasting our time? Just tell us what we need to do. A classroom is a great example. Tell me your opinion. I want to talk to you. I want to, oh, this person's going to give their example and their example. And if you're stuck in that classroom, you're like, oh, just let the teacher talk. Tell them what we need to do. To make sure they tell us what we need to do so we can get out of here. Right? I don't need to hear all this mumbo jumbo talking. And this is a really important difference. And I think this week, when we're looking at some of more societal or structural differences of why conflict comes up, often the conflict comes from this either needing of lower power, and that the person in the leadership is accountable to the same rules and regulations as everybody else in the group, or someone who wants more high power distance. So if you're a low power distance or a high power distance person, it doesn't mean you have the power or don't have power. It means that you accept that some people will have more power and privilege than others. And that's how you identify where you land on this. All right, the last one is uncertainty avoidance, which I'm going to define for you here. Uncertainty avoidance, and I'll be quick about this one, is that it's when people of the group or society accept or don't accept ambiguous situations. So it's the degree of which people will accept ambiguity. And by ambiguity, let's just call it the unknown, what we don't know, or things that are outside our group. So uncertainty avoidance culture is going to really rally around, and there's going to be a lot more rules, a lot more regulations and laws, and things will be much more explicit about what's okay and not okay for the culture, including who you can talk to and can't talk to, or who you can date and not date, or what you can know and not know. And there'll be depending on the degree of the group, because it works on a spectrum. But way over here, we could really be building walls around that group. And we don't want outsiders in the unknown to contaminate this group. The reason is always for safety. We must keep everybody safe no matter what. And that is usually the reason for all the rules and regulations and laws, is for the safety of the group. Now, I would say in the United States, we're a pretty high uncertainty avoidance culture, but a lot of the debate that happens is, what does it mean to be safe, and how are we safe, and in what is the context or situation of safety and how we do it. And once you start listening to the news with this filter on, you will hear it starting to come up a lot more. Just as a note, this doesn't mean that one culture, a low uncertainty avoidance culture, doesn't want rules or doesn't want safety. It just sees they're okay with a little more ambiguity around it and how we govern it. And this is different than someone who likes to participate in risky activities. So you could have someone who likes to go ziplining, for example. And if they're in a more high uncertainty avoidance culture, they tend towards that. Won't go ziplining unless we know that there's a lot of regulation. I want to know that the people who are taking me out there are certified instructors, and that the zip line is inspected every single day, right? They're going to want a lot more. Where someone who's more low uncertainty avoidance, they might be willing to travel to other countries where they don't even speak the language. They're not really worried about the rules and regulations around the zip line. They just want to go have fun. And that might be one way to think about high uncertainty versus low uncertainty. Okay, so that is what I have for week 2. That was a lot of stuff. I don't know if you hung in all the way to the bitter end. For your upcoming assignment, the team assignment, please read through the questions. You'll be asked some questions that you'll want to have prepared for before you get into your team meeting. I'll talk to you all soon. Bye-bye.